This one I think is specifically going to cheer you up, Paul, because
Uh-oh.
we got Matt coming in from Texas. He's an atheist, and apparently he is a fan of you talking about Habermas. So, Matt, can you
Okay.
hear us?
Hey guys, how you doing tonight?
Not
Doing
bad.
well.
Well, hey Paul, I wanted to ask you a quick question about your recent Gary Habermas video, which I probably watched about literally 20 times,
Oh,
where he
okay.
admitted that where he admitted and where you broke down how he never actually did a head count of scholars for his
Hmm.
minimal facts.
Yes.
And
Um,
yeah,
Go ahead.
and I was wondering I was wondering if you had actually read on his website where he lays out how he did do a head count. So I was wondering if you what your thoughts are on that. I could read it to you if you want. If you
Um,
think maybe, yeah,
well, let me tell you what I know, and you can let me know if what you said recently contradicts. How about that? So I would reach over to my shelf, but that's bad TV. So the new Habermas books, he's got a 4-volume magnum opus that he's been working on. Volume 1 and 2 have come out in 2024. I have both of them. I've read both of them multiple times, even though they're 1,000-page books. But volume 3 is allegedly the raw data.
yeah,
So volume 3, which comes out, I believe, March or April, we will see. That will be the shoe dropping as to whether or not the data is actually there. The trouble is that he now seems to be backtracking, as I pointed out in these interviews, and basically saying, no, we didn't do head counts. And so what this raw data volume is going to be is virtually anyone's guess at this point, since he's contradicted himself. He said been public interviews saying this is the raw data, public interviews swearing that he never counted. So that's what I know. I'm basically waiting for this book to come out to find out whether I should be excited or not. What did he say in his interview or on the blog?
on his website he wrote quote I counted a very wide spectrum of scholarly views tracing the responses to about 140 sub-issues or questions related to the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. My bibliography is presently at about 3,400 sources and counting. Initially, I read and cataloged the majority of these publications, charting the representative authors, positions, topics, and so on. So I'm like, and then, I'm wondering if this guy is just senile now. He forgot what he did. What do you
Well,
think?
I I don't like to attribute motive and or do diagnosis. I don't love to necessarily speak to anyone's medical condition, mental condition, or why they're doing what they're doing. But he has been. Uh, your proposition is possible for sure. It sure seems like in interviews, as I've been pointing out in my videos, he is not well remembering debates he's done in the past. He's not well remembering other things that we can verify and look up. The positions of scholars and things like that. I prefer to I prefer to think that he is forgetting as opposed to being dishonest. But I don't know. What do you have? What do you think?
I think what it sounds like, again, I watched your recent video on him probably 20 times, and I was just flabbergasted about how he was like, no, I didn't do a head count, when literally every interview he does for the past, 20 years, he says, I did a head count. And then on a random Wednesday, he said, oh, I never did a head count. I was just flabbergasted, Paul.
So I mean, it's the it, it's tough to know what that's the most recent thing he said. So are we on a recency bias, or should we take it that 99 times he said X and one time he said not X? I don't know. This book is done. The book is at the publisher. So if it doesn't contain data, I don't know what the new 1,000 pages are. So I'd like
Yeah,
to give him the
so
benefit of the doubt that there's something in there, but he's sure being inconsistent. And for anyone who doesn't know, Gary Habermas is a scholar who's made most of his bread and butter talking about the resurrection, So these books are all about Jesus' resurrection, and also near-death experiences is sort of his pet project as well. So that's who it is we're talking about. This is kind of a niche topic, though. Did you have any other uh, observations, Matt, or you just wanted to commiserate on how unbelievable this all seems?
I just wanted to reach out to you and say that I really appreciated that video, and I just wanted to kind of friendly
I
challenge, like, well, what about how he said for several years and then he's backtracking. But anyway, I think his minimal facts approach, because when he says critical scholars, everyone thinks that they're atheists, but right out of the gate on his website it says, quote, most of the critical scholars are theologians and New Testament scholars. And you know
yeah.
what? Guess who he lists as a critical scholar on that list?
Mm, Dale
William
Allison.
Lane Lane Craig.
Oh yeah, William Lane Craig is very highly dubious of the resurrection. That William
So
Lane
it's
Craig.
like,
Yeah.
just because he thinks critically, that he's on the list of critical scholars. Isn't that crazy?
Mm, yeah.
Any-
Yeah. But
anyway,
you can count on my review in a few months whenever the book is out for sure.
I really appreciate that. One just random question, and my last question: Do you still think that Tacitus is a good historical source for Jesus? I know you said that about 8 years ago. I was wondering if you changed your mind.
I do think he is among the best of those, and I do. So I don't. If all I had was Tacitus, and not some of the internal evidence, I wouldn't think that Tacitus alone is good. I do think, though, Tacitus was unique amongst the the early secular, the early non-Christians who read about Jesus, in that as a Roman official who had access to records and stats, and he was, in that peacekeeping role, that he at least plausibly wouldn't have written that we put him to death based
Yeah.
solely on what the Jews said, right? So he, as a Roman citizen and as a Roman, enforcer, or at least the historian for the enforcers, likely wouldn't have, taken claim for his death if he was a person that didn't exist. He was at least in a position to know. So that's why I think he's the best of the non-Christian early sources. But
Could he
that's
have
I don't hinge my
Yeah.
whole historicity case on that. Does that answer the question?
It does. Do you think he could have just been parroting Christian beliefs at that time?
He absolutely could have been. Like, that's not implausible, right? That he's been that that everyone around him, all the Christians around him, saying, "You put this guy to death," and he's like, "I'm just going to take you at your word that we did," because they were crucifying hundreds, according to Josephus, right? Like sometimes hundreds in a day. So, did they write everyone's name down? I don't know. Likely not. So
Yeah.
it's not implausible, but I do think that he was, at least, if he was right, if I remember correctly, Tacitus was writing to the emperor in this, at least the governor, if not the emperor himself. And it seems a little bit sloppy to, again, take credit for a death that they didn't do.
I
Go
think
ahead.
you might be confusing Tacitus and Pliny the Younger. It was Pliny
I
who
might
wrote
be.
to the Emperor Trajan.
Oh yes, you're right.
About,
You're
hey,
right. And
I
Pliny,
got this. Yeah.
you're correct. Yeah, sorry. Thank you for that clarification. Yeah, no. But Tacitus was, I'm correct on the other things I said about Tacitus, right, Aaron?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As far
I
as
mean,
you
yeah,
can,
he
as
was.
far
I
as you
mean,
remember.
yeah, as far as I can remember, and if I also may throw a spanner into that work, it's because there has been a minimal amount, but some scholarship also wondering if there was also some Christian dabbling with the text. In part, one thing that kind of stands out as one thing that already is a head scratcher is when he introduces the Jesus or the Christians, he talks about the Christians with an E instead of an I.
Christos, yeah.
Yeah. And then after that, he talks about Christ with an I. And it's like, wait, these don't even match. What's going on here? And there might be some evidence that maybe that part about talking about Jesus and Pilate was added, and instead he was actually talking about a different group of people we know about, because there was this Crestus figure that Suetonius talks about in Rome causing a ruckus. So there's some possibility that the text has been altered a bit to make it so it's about the Christ that the Christians care about and not the Crestus that nobody even remembers. one other detail that makes it a bit interesting is that the Christians very much like to talk about all their persecutions. And the earliest possible reference that the Christians make to this persecution under Nero is in the 5th century. And it's hard to imagine, for example, Eusebius in the century before being the first like major church historian, talking about like how awesome Christianity is and how great it is that Constantine's now one of the club and all the terrible things that the Christians had to go through, but somehow never mentioned that whole connection between the Christians being blamed for the fire in Rome and Nero going on and persecuting them. Somehow didn't seem to remember that, even though it was supposed to be in Tacitus. So there's at least that kind of evidence that indicates maybe somebody meddled with the text in the Middle Ages. But again, it's only a possibility. We don't have enough manuscript evidence to say one way or the other. So like I say, I'm just throwing a spanner even in that very minor thing from Tacitus.
And as I said, if all we had was Tacitus, I probably wouldn't hang my hat just on that. But
and then again, some historians say, hey, that's good enough to say someone existed. So I guess we'll never know. But really quickly, do you know what the oldest surviving manuscript of where Tacitus mentions Jesus is from the 11th century?
That's honestly not surprising because most of our manuscripts are copies of copies of copies, and you're much more likely to have you're much more likely to have something later than earlier, simply because of the nature of time and the nature of the climate in Europe.
Yeah, that doesn't specifically bother me, but it certainly does lend itself to interpolation. More time for interpolations for sure.
Yeah,
gotcha. If only we knew what his source was.
If only we did. Although, I mean, for me, it's just pragmatically when I'm talking to theists, it's just so much more practical to assume assuming he's a guy. I feel like is probably the default position given the way historians work, and it's so much whether it was legends about a real guy or a bunch of legends that were made out of whole cloth isn't the interesting question to me. So I feel like it's just so much pragmatically, it's so much easier just to start with it was based on a guy. So that's kind of where I land.
If an Egyptian pharaoh's name is listed on a wall in Egypt in hieroglyphics, for historians, that's enough to say that they existed. I mean, I don't know. So,
well, that's the default, but history is never certainty, right? History is when you corner a historian at a party and you say, what does certainty mean to you? Like, what percentage is enough for you to say it's really certain? I've had one tell me, about like 60%. If I'm 60%, then I speak about it like it's certain. So in-house, they know that this doesn't mean definitely it was there. It's just in terms of, what they have to work with. That's what they have to work with. I know I would love for all these sources to be way better than they are. I might even be a Christian if they were way better than they are. So.
One last
Matt.
Final note is that Gary Habermas says that the best book on Jesus outside the Bible on the historical Jesus is Robert Van Voorst's book. And in Robert Van Voorst's book, he says Tacitus is useless because we don't know what his source is. And I was like, well, the game's kind of over then. But anyway.
Well, you're not wrong. We're working with what we got.
I appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.